Hello, I'm here once again to talk to you about Between Dystopias, The Road to Afro-Pantheology, which is a collection of short stories by two authors, Joshua Uchenna Omenga, who is a lawyer, editor, and writer, whose work I first came across in the collection last year, Africa Risen, which was phenomenal. And that collection, I believe I actually read it very early on this year, but it came out at the end of last year, I think in November. But that collection was in part edited by the other author in here, Oghenechovwe Ekpeki. I've been following him since 2020, I believe it was, ever since Dominion was released, and I've been reading basically everything he has worked on since then. Although, I loved Dominion, I loved Africa Risen, I have loved Between Dystopias. I even enjoyed the sort of non-fiction anthology of speculative fiction, African speculative fiction in the time of COVID. I forgot the name of that exactly. I really loved the World's Best African Speculative Fiction 2021. I think 2022 also came out and I just never got around to it, but I will have to go back. I believe the first book for the first story of that one was Blue House, I think was the name of it, and it's still in my mind. I think about it at least once a week. I think he's had a really pretty interesting career with trying to bring up a lot of voices of African and African diasporic authors. And he's really been doing his best. There's a few nonfiction pieces in this book that I would like to mention briefly. One is named after himself, Oghenechovwe Ekpeki, and it talks about basically the lack of respect for African people, in particular authors, but just African people as a whole, and disrespect to and insult to their culture. He brings up this idea about names not being respected and trying to say them right. I am doing my best. I hope I have been saying the names right. I've been saying the full names for a reason, and this piece is really a call for recognition for the achievements and success and excellence of African people. And there's also a really great piece called A Different Kind of Show, Not Tell, which is all about the struggles he's had to make what he's been doing sound viable. And I would say, he's been nominated for a lot of awards, won quite a few of them, and has been a bit of a trailblazer in terms of getting these voices out and getting people to start talking more about African speculative fiction. So, he's had a lot of struggles. One in particular that I'm well aware of is his issues with Amazon, although you can buy any of his books through Amazon. There were a lot of problems with that, and their refusal to pay. But even getting publishers to think that this is something that could be profitable and that people would be interested in was a great struggle. I personally feel, outside looking in, it's been a great success. Certainly I look forward to these kinds of collections every year from him. So yeah. Anyway, I would like to talk about Joshua Uchenna Omenga's stories too. He's got a really interesting one called The File of Olodumare. I think that's how you say it. It's about some Chinese dock builders who try to steal the File of Olodumare. One of the characters' name is Junli, and he's sort of the main guy, or girl, I think. I forgot right now. But he gets into a lot of trouble. They all have some difficulties there, let's say. That's putting it lightly. Um, I do believe this is a commentary or criticism of the relationship of China with African nations, as they do have a lot of economic involvement with each other. And I think that this is meant to be a criticism of that. I don't know too much about those elements of geopolitics, but it was interesting to read the story still. It was very well paced, and I thought it was quite fun. I also really loved, of course, the deification of Igodo. I thought this was a really phenomenal story in Africa Risen, and still here. It's one of my favorites, about a man who becomes a hero and his pride tells him to become a god. And he gets tested on that. The way he's tested is just very nerve-wracking and uncomfortable and awesome. And I think this story, along with many others, whether it's Ife Yoku or O2 Arena, Oxygen Arena, which I believe was an award-winning story, Nebula Award winner. And I think this sort of gets at the heart of this idea of between dystopias, the road to Afropantheology, this idea of Afropantheology being an exploration of the wisdom and knowledge and gods and, customs of Africa through these stories. And the between dystopias part is sort of showing, this is sort of, it sounds like a very traditional, the deification of Igodo sounds like a very traditional kind of story that would have been passed down orally, but is written into text. And there's sort of a lot of wisdom that comes from it. And in a way, there are things about it that I think there's, maybe it's not really real, right? If we're putting on our sort of thinking hats and our scientific brains to analyze things, some of the things that the other god does would defy belief, or defy science or anything like that. But it's not really about that. These are sort of ideas and values that can be believed and understood, and they can show sort of a dystopia that expresses something that can only really be shown through fiction in our real life dystopia. And there is some kind of play and interconnection between what is real in our world and what is real in the this African mysticism, African cosmological exploration of the god, or trying to become a god in this village and this kind of thing. And all the stories have some elements of mysticism or cosmology or something like that, or even, speculative fiction. In a way, it makes them quite difficult, as it says in the introduction, very difficult to label them as, oh, this is a fantasy story, because it's not quite fantasy. There is something real about it. There is something religious about it, I guess, which is not necessarily fantasy. And there's something, I guess I already said real, but something true about it, right? That can still be believed. And I think that's where that connection is coming into play. Before I make more of a fool of myself trying to explain things that I'm still learning about, I would like to recommend that you check this out.